In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Giver of life. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning. Wonderful to see you here. Before I forget, I want to remind you that after receiving communion today, I believe we will be having prayers of healing in the Marian Chapel. Is that right, Francis? So please feel free to come into the Marian Chapel to receive prayers for healing if you so desire. Today I want to kind of look at one of the, sort of go back to the fundamentals. You know, every once in a while it's kind of important to go back to the basics, kind of remind ourselves of some of the kind of key components of the faith. Sometimes we forget, we get a little too sophisticated for our own good sometimes. I want to especially reflect on the beautiful passage from Hebrews. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Unpack that a little bit. And I wonder if you might remember a TV commercial that was on a few years ago. Featured a number of baseball players talking about their faith. One guy says, "I believe in the long ball." Another says, "I believe in the designated hitter." And another says, "I believe in the fastball down and in." Very impressive. And there was a similar series of ads for Reebok a few years earlier featuring like these grainy black and white images. Maybe you remember this. Grainy black and white images of sweating, muscular women pumping iron in some kind of post-industrial wasteland. And then they would turn to the camera and sort of snarl something about believing in flat abdomens or running shoes that cost a lot of money or something like that. Very impressive. And then, of course, my favorite, Kevin Costner's speech in Bull Durham, one of my favorite movies. Most of the speech I cannot repeat here, but he managed to win the love of Annie Savoy by saying, among other things, "I believe in the small of a woman's back, the hanging curveball, high fiber, good scotch, and that the novels of Susan Sontag are self-indulgent and overrated." And she goes, "Oh my." Love that. But it makes me wonder, what does it mean about us that a statement of belief, even belief in a relatively trivial thing like the hanging curveball, can appear bold and impressive, you know? I can't help but to think that we've kind of gotten ourselves worked into this position where our belief in big things, you know, like, I don't know, the Bill of Rights, you know, the idea of God, for instance, the, you know, principle of innocent until proven guilty, big things like that kind of have become so precarious, so fragile, that our commitment to grand ideas and noble virtues has become so fragile that we kind of resort to believing in the small things with great passion, you know, the hanging curveball. Deep in our bones, we know that it's important to believe in something, no matter how small. So say it with conviction. In the first half of the 17th century, Descartes declared his belief in the power of the human mind when he said, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am. If there were a creed for our age, I wonder what it would be. Maybe something like, "Consumero ergo sum." I shop, therefore I am, right? But the Christian's motto is, and must always be, Credo Ergo Sum. I believe, therefore I am. We believe in nothing if not belief. Christians might disagree about many matters of doctrine and faith, but we all believe in the power of belief to shape our lives and define who we are. What do you believe? What is the most important thing that you believe? Maybe it's something like, "I believe I can kick this cancer." Maybe it's, "I believe that love conquers hatred." Maybe it's, I believe my father was wrong when he called me a lazy bum. It's a useful exercise to take some time every once in a while and write down the things that you believe and explore where that takes you. Pretty soon as you go down that road, you start defining the most important things that you believe. You find yourself using religious language maybe. I believe that God is real. I believe that maybe God will heal me. You might even recite the Nicene Creed. I believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. Or you might not. The most important thing that you might believe might not be about God at all. It might be about yourself. I believe I'm an alcoholic. I believe I'm a good person. I believe I'm a sinner. Or it might be about someone you love, right? I believe in my children. I believe that my spouse will remain faithful to me. Or it might be something hoped for. In the words of our reading from Hebrews today, the conviction of things not seen. I believe in the American dream. I believe in the dream of Martin Luther King. Our most important beliefs are usually the ones that we cling to when we're fighting for our lives. There was a time in my life when I was waging a losing battle against hopelessness and despair. Everything that I thought I believed was being disproven. I thought I believed in God, but in my despair, I took that for a lie. I thought I had a bright future in front of me, but when for 2 years I couldn't find a decent job anywhere, I took that to be a lie as well. I believed that I would find a companion and settle down, but I found myself alone and broke and rootless and discouraged and without a future. I took all of that optimism about my life that I'd absorbed in the baby boomer culture, all of it I took to be a lie. Everything I believed about myself was turning out to be wrong. And then, one Sunday morning, quite against my will, I went to church. And I found myself staring up at this cross that was hanging above the altar, and I realized that this God that these Christians worship is a God who had suffered and died just as I was suffering and dying at that time. And I realized that this God that suffered and died was suffering and dying inside of me. I could feel the God in me just dying. And that this pain that I was feeling, suddenly I realized this pain that I was feeling was not my pain, but God's pain, brought home to me through Jesus. And at that moment, I came to realize that what I believed about myself was insignificant compared to what I believed about God. Because God was suffering with me now, redeeming my pain, making it all make sense. And that there was something beyond my own petty life that was drawing me out of the muck of my own self-centered spiral down into the grave. And suddenly I felt like I was being lifted up from the confines of my own life, lifted by the power of this source of all life itself, this healing, loving, joyful power of light. And I came to believe with all of the apostles and martyrs and the saints that this source of life, this one, was Jesus. For me, everything that I believed about myself had been straw and then suddenly turned to gold. And I had to go through that awful pain in order to find the deeper truth. And all of that sense of vanity and chasing after the wind, it all brought me to that place where I could lay it out on the line and be open and honest in my pain and beg God for some answers. And they came. And then ultimately what happened was that it wasn't an intellectual affirmation that dawned upon me at that time. It wasn't as if I came up with some abstract idea that suddenly seemed true to me, as if you can just sort of like walk your way up into heaven through some steps of reason. It was something that came to me, entered into the marrow of my bones, and seems to have been this truth that I knew had been there all along, that I'd only just finally kind of understood and realized. And it almost felt like it was a truth that had sought me out. As I opened myself to it, it came to me and spoke to me. And it felt like I was sort of floating in the ocean of my mortality, clinging to a life preserver then. And it was saving me. You know, we kind of live in this age where we rarely pause to consider our most important beliefs. Some of us kind of just believe in the eternal whatever, you know. Who am I to say what is? We learn to make our way through our days with kind of a practical sense of what needs to get done, and we don't often take the time to ask the deeper questions. We get wary of, sometimes, beliefs, especially passionate beliefs. We tend to think in this age of science that we should only believe in that which we think is reasonable, perhaps. We believe in hypotheses. But belief in God is completely different from that. God invites us to believe not in the probable, not in the possible, but the insanely impossible by any rational measure. Inviting Abraham to believe that he and Sarah would have children in their old age. Inviting his disciples to believe that this man, Jesus, had risen from the dead. These are not reasonable beliefs. They're of a different category altogether. They're of this substance of convictions of things not seen. They go to the realm of the mysteries of God and to the heart of who we are and whose we are and who we're serving and where we're going. If we're unable to answer these questions, if our only creed is a creed of ambivalence and uncertainty, if the best that we can say is, I don't know, it's all relative, then our ambivalence and our uncertainty can take us nowhere but into this spiral, into death. When we fail to answer the question of what we believe about God, we end up like Pontius Pilate, washing our hands of responsibility, asking, what is truth, and sacrificing Christ as a result, never knowing until it's too late what we missed. So I encourage you, before the summer ends, take some time, find yourself in a quiet spot, with maybe a piece of paper, pencil. Give yourself 15 minutes. That's all. And just start writing down what is the most important thing that you believe and see where that leads you. And you won't get there by any means other than by asking God to speak to you during that time. Let prayer be your guide with an open heart. And you might be surprised at what happens. The risen Christ may yet appear, as he did for me. Somebody say, Amen.